welcome back. This has been a week, let me tell you. I've read / listened to 9 books. I had the time because we've had a lot of flooding in Australia and my house unfortunately did get flooded. It's been sort of like an unusual weather event, but you know, it's almost finished. I think after tonight we'll have a break and be able to go in and hopefully fix all the damage to all the rooms that have been affected. But for now, it's just towels and buckets everywhere, trying to stem the flow. What's up, Bubba? Sorry about that, my daughter came in. All right, so I listened to The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I gave this 3.5 stars. Lucy's been writing her dissertation about Sappho for 13 years when she and Jamie break up. After she hits rock bottom in Phoenix, her Los Angeles-based sister invites Lucy to house sit for the summer. Her only tasks include caring for a beloved diabetic dog and trying to learn to care for herself. On Venice Beach, Lucy can find no peace from her misery and anxiety. Not in her love addiction group, therapy meetings, not in frequent Tinder meetups, not in Dominic the Foxhound's easy affection, not in ruminating on the ancient Greeks. Yet everything changes when Lucy becomes entranced by an eerily attractive swimmer one night while sitting alone on the beach. Now, if you remember last week, I just started listening to this and I said how much of a train wreck it was and how weird the book was. It just got weirder. I can't say a lot about it without spoiling what it is, but it is a weird book. I'd say there's some magical realism in it. The main character, Lucy, is not likable. At least I did not like her. She does cause a lot of harm to herself and to the people who love her. Yeah, a lot of stuff happens. It's quite crude and crass as well. Like Lucy's mind is quite crude and crass. It's quite explicit. And there is I would say, obviously there's a lot of trigger warnings, but the big one for me was sort of animal abuse. So I'm just putting that out there. That's something that I really don't like. Personally, I can handle all the other ones. There's also addiction in here. There's suicide. There's a whole lot. But the animal one was a really tough pill for me to swallow. I understand why people hate it. So I saw a lot of reviews after this and people were fuming. And I get it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I gave it 3.5 because it was entertaining. It was really easy to listen to. And normally I don't find fiction audiobooks easy to listen to. But it was. And like I said, I did enjoy it. As problematic as it is. So that was The Pisces. Then I listened to The Book of Living Secrets by Madeleine. I gave this 3 stars. Perfect for fans of the Hazelwood, this genre-bending page-turner from New York Times best-selling author follows 2 girls who transport themselves into the world of their favorite book, only to encounter the sinister reality that awaits them. Okay, so this was not what I was expecting. It is genre bending, not what I was expecting in how it panned out. The book that they want to go into is a romance book, so I was expecting something completely different than what I got. I gave it 3 stars because I give books 3 stars that I don't hate, that I don't love, but that were good enough for me to continue reading. It's okay. It's okay. It was split between one of the girls, I think her name was Connie, I can't remember the other girl's name, between their POVs. I didn't really like Connie's chapters. I just didn't connect to her at all. I didn't find it interesting. There's some sapphic romance in this as well. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. And then something happens at the end. It's one of those books where right on the last page, they're like, dun, dun, dun. They reveal some major twist thing and you're just like, but wait, what? Can you please explain? But yeah, so I'm not a fan of that when they just do that right at the end. It's just I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to read a sequel. I didn't enjoy it enough. I'll talk about it more in the spoiler section. So we'll have a spoiler section today. Then I'm going to list the DNFs. So I DNF'd Unraveler by Frances Hardinger. Cal and Netta live in a world where anyone can create a life-destroying curse, but only one person has the power to unravel them. Not everyone is happy he can do so. And suddenly he's in a race to save both himself and all those who've been touched by magic. Okay, so I DNF'd this at 10%. It had an interesting premise. I did have this was the audiobook, and in the audiobook, the narrator gave Callan a dumb voice. And by dumb, I mean they made him sound like he was an idiot. It's that voice you do when you are mimicking your partner in an argument. and you want to make them sound stupid. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do. It's something I have done in the past though, my previous marriage. I didn't enjoy it. I just didn't get into it. It was really confusing. I didn't know what was happening. It didn't mesh. It didn't line up for me, and I just found myself tuning out. And I wasn't interested enough to actually pick up the book and read it. So that was that one. And then we've got The Woman in the Library by Solari Gentile. I DNF'd this at 11. I'm going to sneeze and I'll edit it out. Every person's story, there is something to hide. The ornate reading room at the Boston Public Library is quiet until the tranquility is shattered by a woman's terrified scream. Security guards take charge immediately, instructing everyone to stay put until the threat is identified. While they wait for the all clear, 4 strangers who sat at the same table pass the time in conversation and friendships are struck. Each has his or her own reasons for being in the reading room. It just happens that one is a murderer. So I had a good premise, but it just fell so flat. I did 11% on the audiobook. So this had a very weird setup. You had one chapter in the view of like the main character who's at this table. That main character is an author and she's trying to like write a story and she's getting inspiration from everything that's happening around her. And then the next chapter, so the following chapter would be her male friend's point of view on her story as it's progressing. So he would give her the critique, and he was American, so he was giving her advice on like, well, if they were in the Boston Library, then they would, blah, blah, blah. That's not realistic. This is what they'd say. We don't say jumpers, we say sweaters or whatever. I can't do accents. So I found that so jarring. I'm like, what is this? And I didn't like his chapters. I just didn't like his voice, his personality. I don't know. I didn't care for like his critiquing of her book. And it was true. He was pointing out a lot of plot holes in her story. And I'm like, yes, I would agree with these plot holes. Maybe when you read the whole book, it all weaves in really well, but it just was not working out for me whatsoever. Like the security guards in the story literally just had a quick look for like a few minutes, and you're telling me in those few minutes that she's just sort of making conversation with strangers, that they've struck a magical friendship and they all want to keep meeting up and they all want to solve this murder, because it turns out someone was murdered, and yet the security guard didn't see the body at that time. It just was all over the place, and I was like, I don't care enough to even find out who the murderer was. So I'm like, did someone really get killed? I don't know, it just fell flat. And I was drawn to it because I liked the cover, and it was about a library, and a library is my happy place. It's where I worked for how many years? And then we've got Sunbathing, which I DNF'd at 12% by Isabel Beach. Summertime in Italy, fresh vegetables from the garden, taking turns washing dishes, reading to each other, learning about cherry worms. Strange how badly I could punish myself for abandoning you once, then go and do it again. After weeks of grieving, a woman books a plane ticket bound for an old villa in the mountains of Abruzzo. So this was a book about a girl who lost her former lover, and like they've been broken up for years. So they've been broken up for years, and it's sort of in her POV. And she goes to Italy with her friends, and it's just, I've DNF'd it at 12%, which was a decent way through because it's a short book. And she was still just reminiscing about her ex, and I think she was like meeting up with her ex's like new girlfriends. Every time I get a new girlfriend break up with her, she'd like meet up with them. I don't know, it was a bit weird, but it was just it was too slow paced. I didn't care. I wasn't getting the feels or the emotional complexity to it. I've read other books about grief and they were more poignant to me. This one just didn't hit the spot. So I just thought, no, I'm not going to finish that. I'm going to DNF it. And now we have come to the physical books, and we've got, well, I've got this one that I DNF'd. This is the Agathas. A town cursed with missing girls, bad boyfriends, family secrets, and very steep cliffs. Turns out it's about teenagers. So I just don't care about teenagers. It's sort of like, it was very reminiscent at the start of it, of like Mean Girls. Like they all talk about all the cliques and where they sit, and the jocks sit here and they sit there. And I used to be one of the popular kids, but then something happened and now I'm not one of the populars. I don't care about that stuff. I'm just too old. I don't care how well it's written. I'm over it. So I DNF'd that one, unfortunately. Then we've got The Divine Art of Dying, Living Well to Life's End. I DNF'd this almost immediately. No, actually I gave it, I'd probably say 25%. I actually read quite a bit, to be honest. It's a small book. It's also about one woman's like journey with ovarian cancer, but it and choosing to die with dignity after battling for like 10 years, I think, with chemo constantly and then chemo failing. She just decides, I'd rather have a few years lived well than be sick, you know, constantly fighting for another 5. But it just didn't pull it off for me. So you'd go between Karen, her journal entries, and then the person writing, and just talking about death in general, and like a lot of it in regards to like being a caretaker of people who are dying. So this just wasn't for me at this point in time. Like sometimes it's just not the right timing, and you just don't resonate with the book, and it just doesn't do anything for you. So I just didn't have that too. Those are 2 bonuses. They're not included in my 9. So we've got Jessica O's Cold Enough for Snow. A young woman has arranged a holiday with her mother in Japan. They travel by train, visit galleries, talk about the autumn rain, prospect of snow. All the while they seem to talk about the weather, horoscopes, clothes, about the mother's family in Hong Kong, but uncertainties abound. How much is spoken between them and how much is thought but unspoken? This just did not work for me. So it's very pretty. It's prettily written. Just nothing happens. There's no plot at all. And I wouldn't even call this character based because you just don't know anything about anybody else except the main girl, the daughter. It's all in her head. And she just doesn't talk to her mother at all. And like how much is unspoken? Everything's unspoken. They don't talk. There's no communication there. I can't read books that are about zero communication because we live in a world now which is very different to the ones of our grandparents when, you know, you didn't really know your parents as human beings. It was just sort of mum and dad. You don't know them as Jane and John and their passions and their dreams. Whereas these days, I do know my parents. I know their backstories. I know their trials and tribulations. I know them as human beings. And I feel like I just can't, this is the age of communication, I feel, currently. We are more open to talking about our feelings, to talking to the other person, to saying, hey, these are my wants, my needs, these are my boundaries. And I'm just like, you just can't say to your mum, hey, mum, I'd really like to talk with you and get to know you. I'd like you to hear me. I'd like to be seen by you. I'd like to see and hear you. You're just standing there in silence, just like hoping your mother will engage with you. And then when she doesn't, just being sad and depressed about it. I don't know. I can't relate. It's not that I just can't relate, but I just can't read about it. I hate the miscommunication trope, not only in non-fiction, but in fiction too. I can't stand it when the whole book revolves around 2 characters just not communicating with each other. Like, I don't want that to be a vehicle for a plot. I hate it. Just talk. Like, especially like these days, I just cannot sit and stew on things. If I need to bring something up, maybe, I understand sometimes in the moment you can't, but then when you take some time, you eventually be like, you know what, nah, bruh, like we've got to talk. I need to say this, even if it's like you send a text message, you always end up getting it out there because when you hold stuff in, that's not good for your body. You don't want to be holding those things in. You've got to use your throat chakra and speak. So this did not do anything for me. I read it all because it was so thin, but it was just really dull and boring, to be honest. Then we've got The Shaman's Book of Living and Dying by Alberto Villaldo, which just talks about their work as a shaman and their customers, patients, whatever you want to call them. I did not like this book. So Alberto Villaldo wrote it, obviously, and Anne O'Neill. I don't know who wrote what, but there's like his patients' names too, but all of them have the same voice. Like there's no, I don't see the differentiation between their passages and experiences and his passages. It all feels like same. It feels like when you see those Google reviews on something and read those 5-star reviews and you get that feeling like, I think the person wrote that themselves. I think they made other Google accounts and they wrote them. I think they got their friends and they told their friends what to write. I feel like Alberto Villaldo is just giving himself 5 stars in this book from other people. So I don't know what it was. I just didn't it didn't sit well with me. It didn't feel authentic. It just felt really like, look how great I am. Look at all these people I helped. And it wasn't for me. It's not the book on shamanism for me. So that was that one. And then we've got How We Are Translated by Jessica Gaetan Johannesson. People say I'm sorry all the time when it can mean both I'm sorry I hurt you and I'm sorry someone else did something I have nothing to do with. It's like the English language gave up trying to find a word for sympathy, which wasn't also the word for guilt. So this has a beautiful cover. I love the cover of this. This had premise, but then when I read it, it just didn't, it was so bizarre. It was so weird to read. It was about this woman and her partner and sort of just their lives together. So it's not, to be honest, that interesting. But the way they talk, I found it odd. I'm going to try and find just something. Okay, I'll just read this. I've known you. You've been lived, life scared, of being selfish without noticing. Mrs. Pullingham's dress proves a point. Where to put it? It's a shame you don't snore. At least that would be something coming out of your face, which you couldn't make dictatorial decisions about. The light from the lounge windows arranges shadows on the opposite wall into a great still life. A cushion's transformed into a Pac-Man. 2 picture frames become simple yet elegant second homes for rich people. A potted plant grows rabbit ears and a fat cigar. The odd passing car transmits coded singles. I could describe the entire room through its shadows. Have you ever seen the flat do this? What is the worst thing that could be going on within a 5-mile radius right now? If it's the worst things that happen right now, where would we go? It's just like, what? Huh? What are you saying? What are you talking about? I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know. It's really weird. I guess lost in translation. I don't know. I just found her thoughts to be a jumbled mess. It was almost like stream of consciousness in a way, and I can't read books that are like that. It's just too confusing, and that sucks so much because I thought this was going to be great. Can't always judge a book by its cover, guys. And then we've got Mortal Remains by Mary Ann Frasier. Lily McRae has heard it all. Despite what the bullies say, she loves her job at her family's funeral home. Lately, though, her friends are drifting away and her father's pushing her into taking over the family business. So she feels lonelier than ever. She finds herself spending her time talking to her clients. After all, the dead are the only ones who listen. But things get complicated when she reconnects with Adam, a boy everyone thought was dead. As Lily juggles friendships and family legacy, can she figure out who she wants to be? And is love enough to overcome the supernatural forces that could drive Lily and Adam apart in this powerful gothic story of love, death, past and future, magic and science? Oh, this was weird. This was, once again, not what I was expecting. It was a bit Frankenstein-esque in terms of, like they said, like that science element came in, and I wasn't a big fan of, like, I'm not a huge fan of like weird science, mad scientist angle. Sorry, doesn't really do it for me. I thought it was more going to be like about a book about a mortician, funeral home director, her sort of world in that, taking over that family. But that was, the funeral home is like not even really in it. It's like once she reconnects with Adam, it's just all about solving the mystery. So it's more of like a mystery book with a mad scientist edge to it. The book is largely dialogue, like all dialogue. So it's easy to read in that respect. I find just dialogue books very easy to read, but there's no world building, there's no like atmosphere. There's not really any also like character development. Like Lily's fine, she's just a regular person, but it stays very like surface level. I will talk more about this in the spoiler section again because I can't give the twist away, but it's not something that I'm like super interested in general as a genre. And if I knew that's what it would be about, I wouldn't have read it. But like, yeah, I'll give it, I think it's 3.25. I'll give it 3.25 because I did read it pretty quickly. And if a book's very easy to read, I get more points for it. You know, it's great when you just breeze through a book. But I'll talk about that more at the end. Now I'm doing the kids section. So I'm doing for older readers, Roald Dahl's Matilda, illustrated by Quentin Blake, whose style we all know and love. This is very old copy. This is a copy I had when I was 8 years old. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Even as an adult, I have read this book. I can't even tell you how many times, too many times to count. I identified so much with Matilda when I was a child in terms of, you know, that sort of alienation in your own family, not being understood and feeling alone. I spent all of my lunch times in junior school in the library at the school because I didn't make friends until right at the end of year 6. So I understand Matilda. I loved Miss Honey. I just dreamed and wished I had a Miss Honey of my own. this is an amazing book. Roald Dahl is a great author. His books are not all light and rainbows. There is a lot of darkness to them, a lot of sarcasm, he just cuts straight to it, cuts through the bullshit, tells it like it is, that there are sometimes mean, nasty people in this world, but there are also good, kind, generous people in this world. I just loved these stories as a child. I still love them as an adult. Out of all of his books, Matilda is my favorite. And I love the movie. And I mean the movie, the original with like Danny DeVito, because I have not seen the new one. I think there's a new one out with like Emma Thompson. I haven't seen it. I don't know how you can beat the original Trunchbull, because man, that actress nailed the Trunchbull. Nailed it. But I highly recommend. My children love this too. So this is just an amazing book. Amazing, amazing. And for younger kids, I've got Giraffes Can't Dance by Giles Andre and Guy Parker Rees. I'll show you some of the pictures. So this is a really, I've got a board book of this because my daughter loved it so much that we destroyed the paper. And even this board book has seen better days. It's a great rhyming book. It's fun to read. I know it off by heart because I've read it so many times. Still to this day, I know it off by heart. It's a beautiful story about a giraffe who can't dance, but you know, I don't want to give it away, but it's heartwarming and it's fun, and it includes animals, and children tend to love animals. So that's a classic children's book, highly recommend. And now I'm going to talk about the spoilers. So if you don't want to see the spoilers, before I do that, actually, to let you know what I'm currently reading. Is it here? So I'm going to start this one, An Exciting and Vivid Inner Life by Paul Dalla Rosa. It's like a whole bunch of short stories that talk about ambition and aimlessness, the curated profile, the unreliable body. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into with this one. It's a cool cover though with the Venus flytrap, but that's what I'm reading. And in terms of what I'm listening to, I think it's called Step Into Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know how to say his name, but I love everything of his. I have read so much of his stuff, and it's one of those things when you find someone whose voice you just like, it doesn't even matter if they say the same thing over and over again, it just always hits for you, and he's one of those people that always hits for me. I have a soft spot for monks and their wisdom, so that's what I'm listening to. All right, now on to the spoilers. Yeah, we've got, the Pisces. Guys, so the Pisces, the animal abuse, I'm going to go straight into it. She neglects the dog. She doesn't take it out to pee. She doesn't walk it. She forgets to give it its medicine. And then she starts dosing it with tranquilizers so that she can get it on with her swimmer boyfriend. I'll get onto that in a second. And just keeps giving the dog more and more tranks until she kills the dog. So the dog dies alone in a cupboard. That was like very upsetting for me to read as an animal lover. I don't even like reading a fake death of an animal. So from that point on, I'm like, well, she is a piece of shit and she deserves some karma, and she didn't get any. So that's what annoyed me too. She didn't even have to pay for her crimes. She should have just got away with like, it must have been a complication with the diabetes. And her sister like believes it, because obviously her sister's not going to be able to even contemplate that her sister killed her own dog, who's like a child to her. So that upset me that there was no justice for Dominic. And then, like I said, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of trigger warnings in this. There's like attempted suicide. One of her friends attempts suicide. She doesn't even try and like help her. She's very self-centered. Lucy's very self-centered, really destructive. Like I said, she hurts people that love her. She hurts herself. There's sex scenes that maybe some people might have an issue with. There's drug addiction. There's a whole smorgasbord of stuff. And then the love interest, the swimmer, turns out to be a merman. Merman. That's a Zoolander reference. I can't, when I say merman, I'm like, merman, essence is the wetness of moisture, whatever it is. Moisture is the essence of wetness. Sorry, it's been a long time since I watched that movie. He's a merman. And so they get it on. It turns out that his tail starts under his junk. So he's got his whole business hanging there, and then the tail begins. So they do the deeds. He loves chowing down on some menses, some period blood. So that's the thing. If you're not into that, he just licks it all up with a Dolmio grin. And then she decides, he keeps asking her to like come into the depths with me, join me in the ocean. It's a bit like elusive about what that means. And then she decides, after she's like killed the dog, you know what, screw it, I'm going to do it. So she goes to go with him, and then she sort of like asks him like, have you done this before? Turns out he has. Turns out this dude loves to get women to fall in love with him, and then he likes to drown those bitches. So there are 19 other dead women under the sea that he has lured to their deaths. And when she finds out that there were other women, she was fine with like dying. She realized like he's probably going to drown me. She was fine with that. But then when she learns he's done it before and she's not the first, she's like, no, it's lost its sparkle. I understand why people hate it. Like I said, she's just not a great person, but it was well written. It kept me reading. So props for that. Then we've got the Book of Living Secrets. So this was the genre bending one. You think they're going into a romance book and then bam, they go into the book separately and there's weird shit going on. There's like inky monsters. There's a giant creature, which I think is Cthulhu. Other people mentioned it too. It had a lot of similarities to that creature, but this giant like kraken-like creature made of ink that wants to consume all the worlds. And then I'm like, so every single author's book becomes a universe, becomes a world that exists? Like, what? But anyway, so they end up going to the book, and the characters that they thought they were in love with, they didn't like, and they end up forming relationships with other characters. But then they're like, we need to save your world, and they try and save the world, but then they're like, okay, peace, we're going back to our world, and they go back to their world. And then it turns out one of the characters at the end, we think she's been taken over by the Kraken and she's bringing the Kraken into the real world. It was too much for me. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I don't like the people. I don't like the dystopian, like ravaged world all of a sudden they're in for almost the entire book. It was just hella depressing. And then when the author who wrote this book gets sucked into the world and she gets killed by her own like characters, I'm like, no. So not into it. Wasn't into it. It was fine, like I said, but it's a meh. And then we've got, what's the other one? Oh, Mortal Remains. This one. So this one, she reconnects with Adam, who is a boy she met once as a child, one time, who saved her life when she fell out of a tree, and then she never sees him again. He's like a weird homeschooled kid. And then she sees him as an adult when his house blows up and supposedly kills his dad, and they find him in like a bomb shelter and save his life. But it turns out people keep trying to kill him. And it's like, what's going on? Why are they trying to kill you? And it turns out like his dad was some mad scientist who stole government stuff or something and pinned it on his ex-co-worker. And then his ex-co-worker busts out of jail. So I think the ex-co-worker is trying to kill them. Turns out he's not. He just wants to find proof that Adam's dad had stolen the documents. It's just this wild ride. And the whole thing turns out being that the dad has discovered a way to make golems. And golems are like clay human being like creatures that are animated, use like Hebrew words etched into them to bring them to life, and he's managed to do it. He brought his son back, so his son is killed in a laboratory incident at home, and he uses his son's ashes to like make this clay thing and bring his son back, so to speak. And the dude Adam does remember his previous life, so like, you're not clay, you're real. And in the end, Lily finds a way to turn him to a real boy. So he's a real boy. He bleeds blood and all that stuff. It was just a bit like, I'm not into the mad scientist angle and the government conspiracies, and then like all of a sudden Golem. And like I didn't really buy the relationship between them. It wasn't that great in that respect. And it's like I said, it's all dialogue, so there's no real substance to it, but it was still entertaining. That's why I gave it 3.25. And I think that's everything. That is everything for this week. I'm excited for next week. There's some interesting books. I've still got that same TBR that I put up, I think in September. So I've still got those library books. I've had to renew them because I didn't finish them all in 3 weeks. Who knew that I wasn't going to be able to finish 40 books in 3 weeks, but I have not. And it's also too because I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks, because I love listening to audio while I'm crocheting. So it's like the perfect thing to listen to while I crochet, because I don't need to look at anything. I can just listen to it while I'm crocheting. So that's what slowed me down. So I might back off the audiobooks a little bit just so I can bust through these library books, because I've got more waiting there to be picked up, and I haven't gone to pick them up yet. I'm waiting till the last day because I'm like, how am I going to do this? I'm overwhelmed. And then I might take a break from the borrowing some more if I can. But I'm sure, like, I've still got 30 reservations, so they might. The thing with libraries, you never know when they're going to pop up. Sometimes you'll get them you know, gradually. And then sometimes it'll be like 10 of your reservations become available in one day. And you're like, okay, that's convenient. But yeah, so that's everything I've read this week. I hope that wherever you are, you're having a marvelous morning, afternoon, or evening. And as always, stay wild, Star Child.